I went back to England after 3 years away, and what I saw shocked me.
Some incident on board or something, so they had to cancel the train. They've completely stopped the line and everyone's had to get off and walk. I hate to think what the incident was, but I just hope it wasn't anything too serious.
I recently went home to the UK after living in China for the past almost 3 years, and the difference is staggering. Whereas once our great nation was an influence on the world stage, the leaders of the EU, with an empire stretching so far around the world that the sun simply never set upon it. Now, those days are a thing of the distant past. In this video, I'm going to share what my experience was like after being away for so long.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to shut down the engines of this train because we have a slight problem. We can't have some passengers ejected. Please bear with me.
How the UK is different, how China has risen during that time, and what I think the future holds for our two countries. 3 years ago, I was sat at home in Oxford thinking about my next steps. Should I move to London or should I move to China? I was working in banking, having just graduated from my MBA postgraduate degree. All of my friends around me were thinking about their next steps too. Whether to buy a house, what field of work they wanted to start their careers in, and for those already in careers, how would they get their next promotion and pay rise? The UK was still an okay place for a recent graduate at that time. Or so it seemed. There was still hope of a good job. Hope of saving up enough money to afford a deposit on a house. Sure, there was still crime on the streets, but nothing like it is today. COVID had just ended. We had just left the European Union. There was a palpable sense that the country would bounce back from the negative growth that we experienced during the pandemic. That new opportunities indeed were on the horizon. The cost of living was still manageable, even for those on low incomes. People could still afford to heat their homes and keep warm during winter. They didn't have to choose between eating or freezing. The first thing that shocked me wasn't the increase in crime, homelessness, or living costs. Rather, it was something aesthetic. Walking down old high streets and city centres, places that I remember were once the heart of the city, filled with vibrancy and packed full of people eating, drinking, and spending money. Well, it isn't like that anymore. Not even in London. People in the West say that the Chinese economy is in ruins, that China is about to follow the route of Japan in the 1980s, almost making it to the top, but then failing dramatically. Well, I don't think that is the case. I think that the actual decline is a little closer to home, but because we're slowly simmering away in the pot, we can't actually comprehend how high the heat is. Taking a walk down any Chinese street late at night and into the early hours of the morning, you are met with hordes of locals entertaining themselves. It seems that these people have disposable income to spend, unlike those in the UK, where it seems people simply can't afford to go out and have fun anymore. How bleak the environment of the UK looks today. Not only that, but of course, these days, crime has risen dramatically. But it's not just the amount of crime or the statistics that is shocking. The truly disturbing nature is in the manner of crime in English society right now. Streets where you can hear a pin drop, if not for the screams of people being robbed or worse, with no one bothering to jump in and help defend. This was us, walking down Camden Market, one of the top tourist spots in the whole of London. The illegal breeds of dogs, clouds of marijuana smoke, and people selling drugs could be ignored. In fact, it can be argued that it adds to the atmosphere of London. I guess it's something novel, an environment that some may find exciting. What couldn't be ignored though was the news report of a young lad being tackled to the ground by police with a 2-foot knife being pulled out of his trousers. Living in Shanghai or Beijing or Guangzhou or Shenzhen, or in fact most tier 1, 2 or 3 cities in China, you don't need to worry about public transport. It's safe, reliable, clean and affordable. Those 4 criteria are the 4 fundamental tenets of good public transportation and infrastructure. How many of those 4 criteria would you think that London's Underground, the most important city in the United Kingdom, has? Well, it wasn't even reliable. Now, it might just be bad luck. But the one time we had to use it, it literally broke down and then was delayed, and we had to get off and walk. I didn't even know that it was prone to doing that. I thought that only happened in New York.
Once again, service information update for the southbound Dorset line. Apologies that this train on the southbound has been held. This is due to an incident on the train ahead at Goose Street.
There we were, home for the first time in 3 years, heading from Camden to Westminster, and it broke down. And of course, that was after we had paid, for which we couldn't get a refund. The ticket to use the Underground for the day was around £15, by the way, about $20 or 130 yuan. In China, there is no way something as insignificant as a subway ticket would cost anywhere near as much of a percentage of what you'd expect to spend in a day. Of course, you can't even drive into London these days, as if you do, you have to pay a tax, which costs around $40. So of course, we took the train from Oxford to London, which is around a 45-minute to 60-minute journey. That cost £60. And of course, the train wasn't even on time. Luckily, I didn't need to use the NHS whilst I was at home, but I have my doubts as to whether that would have been a pleasant experience. The cost of living has shot up. Energy companies used COVID and the Suez Canal crisis as a pretext to raise prices. But once those crises had passed, the prices remained artificially inflated. So much so that British Gas, a company that once belonged to the government, to the people, reported a 1,000 increase in their yearly profits. Can you imagine that? People can't afford to heat their homes, yet the main energy supplier in the country reports a 10-fold increase in profits. Can you imagine that happening in a country like China, or even just in an Asian country, where the government cares for its people? It's not just energy. Food prices have gone through the roof.
First things first, need to go and get a food shop done. I'm gonna buy maybe a week or 2 weeks worth of food and see how much it costs here in the UK compared to how much it would cost me in Shanghai.
Thanks in part due to inflation, of course. But even as inflation has dropped, the prices have remained high, unattainable for much of the population. And that's not just in the UK, that's in America and all across the West as well. Of course, high prices due to inflation wouldn't historically have been a problem, as wages and salaries usually increase too. However, over the past 10-20 years in the UK, that's not what we have seen happen at all. Wages have seen slight incremental increases, yet purchasing power has dropped and inflation increased. In fact, for many key industries like software engineering and cybersecurity, salaries are up to a tenth of what the same position would yield in America. And I saw a joke the other day on Twitter that American tech companies in Silicon Valley should outsource their jobs to Londoners instead of Indians, as it has an English-speaking, highly technical workforce, yet they expect really low salaries. And that's the truth. With all of these factors working against the average citizen, it sadly came as no surprise to me that I did see a lot of homeless people. Much more than I remember there being. Living in China for the past 3 years, I'd kind of forgotten what it's like to see homeless people living rough on the streets. I think I've seen one homeless person in the whole time that I've been in Shanghai, a city of 28 million people. And to be honest, I don't even know if this person was actually homeless or not. Contrast that with London, a city of just 6 or 7 million, and I saw around 15 in half a day. So why has it declined? Why has the UK become such a mess, whilst countries like China have seen such a rise? Well, there are numerous reasons, of course, but I'm going to give a few that are, in my opinion, the biggest, but also ones that kind of relate to China, or can relate to China. Of course, political instability is a big issue in the UK. Off the top of my head, we've changed leader something like 5 times in the last 8 years. Can you believe that? 5 different people have been leader of the country in the last 8 years. The UK claims it's a democratic country, but in the last 10 years, only one leader was elected initially by the public before they actually got into office. So, of course, it's hard for the country to go in the same direction, follow the same plan if it's changing leader every 16 months on average. Contrast this with China, of course. Now, everyone is on the same team politically, following the same plan, doing what is best for the country. Yet, we're continually told in the West that democracy is the way forward. It's the best system of governance. Is it? Now I've seen the other side, I'm really not so sure. Reason number 2 has to be Brexit, of course. We chose to leave the EU, for better or for worse. It's what we decided to do. Yet it's led to labour shortages, more political instability and political division. Then we've had the pandemic, which we never really recovered from economically. The UK has completely lost its authority and influence on the world stage. The country is getting poorer, it seems there is no easy way out, and people are suffering, which is having a huge effect on society and communities. It's bleak and gloomy. China, on the other hand, is in the direct opposite situation. It is booming, it's progressing, it's becoming the global leader in many key areas. So much so that adversaries are so threatened that they are continually trying to tear it down. Media and so-called experts claim that the economy is crashing, yet it topped 5% growth year on year. I personally hope that we see a shift in policy from the UK towards China, start trading more and more, become more friendly and become better partners. It's obvious to any that are willing to look that the world is changing rapidly. It's becoming multipolar. Attention is shifting to the east. The UK is simply not the important, influential country that it once was. And being home, walking the streets, talking to people, and seeing just how run down and bad everything has become really saddened me. Now, this is a purely anecdotal video based on my opinions and experiences. It's not being backed up by facts or statistics, and it doesn't really have any conclusion to it. I just thought I'd share my thoughts with you guys watching because I'm in a pretty unique position whereby I am actually inside China, viewing it from an unbiased perspective. So if you found it insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.